we start this afternoon and I bring welcome, I want to acknowledge that California State University, Los Angeles resides on the Tonga land, a people that did not freely give their lands, but for whom we are benefactors of that land. So we want to always acknowledge the ancestry and the benefaction that we have. Second of all, I want to really just acknowledge that this has been another difficult week in our country. As you know, last year we really suffered losses in our countries with so many deaths of African Americans. Well, this week I want to acknowledge the hate crimes against our brothers and sisters in the Asian American and the Asian communities in our country. There is no place for hate in our country, in our communities. And I want us to take the time to find ways that we can better understand. But I want to acknowledge our solidarity and support of our colleagues and members of our communities and just say that there is no place for hate. Now I want to start with the program. So welcome to A Picture of a Scientist. This is part one of the College of Natural and Sciences, Natural and Social Sciences Women's History Month event, celebrating the contribution of women in science. We will be hearing from 7 senior faculty members from the college who will be sharing their background and experiences, the impact of their gender identity has on their careers thus far. Our hope for the event is that the attendees appreciate the contributions of women to sciences and how to navigate any complicated situations that may arise at any stage of one's careers. Before I move to the panelists for introductions, a few housekeeping items. We will have questions and answer sections toward the end of the panel, and attendees are encouraged to either drop questions using the chat function or raising your hands using the participant portion. To avoid unnecessary background noises, please remain muted during the event except for asking a questions during Q&A. Now, I was particularly excited about this opportunity, and hopefully, if you haven't gotten a chance to see the film Picture of a Scientist, please take the opportunity to do that. We will make that link available to you at another time. We usually, the company that gave us access to it allows it on a 72-hour basis, even though we have broader access to it. So that might inspire you after listening to our colleagues. But part of what I thought was really important is that we really do have some outstanding colleagues. Now, for those of you who are on this call that weren't invited to be part of the panel, it does not mean you're not outstanding. As your dean, I think you're outstanding, and I want to celebrate each of you. But I chose some of the senior most faculty members. All of these women are senior professors, full professors, have been very productive in their careers, having had an opportunity to interact with them in various ways. I just thought it was a great beginning for us as we talk about inclusiveness to hear from our colleagues and to really begin to get to know each other. Some of you who are on the call have gotten to know these women as members of their classrooms, of their research labs, of the projects they've been on. But this is a group of women from across the college. And as I said, Picture of a Scientist is one of the frameworks that I use to facilitate this conversation. And we will do the same for our colleagues in the humanities. And we will look for other opportunities for us to get to know each other and for all of us to get to work and be across the aisles of our disciplines and our departments. With that being said, our first panelist is Dr. Silvia Heubach from the Department of Mathematics. Dr. Heubach?
Yes, I'm on. So let's see, Nene. Okay. So I was hoping I could do this one at a time, but I'll start at the top. I'm originally from a small town in Germany, and this is how it in Google. 15,000 people, small town, it's a forest and fields, another small town, quite different from LA where, I ended up, not according to plan. So my family started a small hotel, and I grew up in that hotel and learned to do all the things you need to do in a hotel. And the typical thing would be that you follow in your parents' business. But my parents recognized that I really liked math, I was good at it. And so they supported me in going to gymnasium, which is the school type that leads to university. But they were really, you're on your own. That's where I really resonate with our students were, as a first generation student, it's like, yeah, you want to go there, but how do you get there? So anyway, I was lucky to find the program at the University of Ulm purely by chance. And I did a master's degree there. And then they had a program that allowed you to go for a year to the US. And as I had embarked on that, my professor said, well, do you want to do a PhD with me? And, I was like, oh, a PhD, okay. Oh yeah, okay, I'll do that. But while I was away for a year, he gave my position to somebody else. And so I actually did a PhD at USC and then had 2 one-year positions at Colorado College and Humboldt State University. And since 1994, I've been at Cal State LA. So next slide, please. So my research area has changed, and this is maybe something you might not expect as a young student, that you're not doing what you started out with, but there is some common theme. I initially did my master's thesis on inventory control, namely how much do you have to order to not have empty shelves or lots of produce that you cannot sell. At USC, I did a stochastic model for the movement of a white blood cell. So both of these are applied math themes, sort of, here's a problem that you want to solve. But then I didn't quite find a research group to work with. And through some work with some colleagues along the way, I got into discrete math, wrote a book on enumerative combinatorics with a co-author, and more recently working on combinatorial games. The last 2 areas are areas where students can really get involved in my research, and that was something that was important to me. And then to balance life work, I try to stand on my head most days. I like to travel, and hopefully that will be able to do that soon. I like puzzle because math is really like a big puzzle. And I like photography. And what you see there is a picture I took at the steeple of the University of the Münster of Ulm, which is the highest church tower in the world. 768 steps to get there, where I took, yes, and no elevators. So that's it from me.
Good. But before I go on, Dr. Heubach, first of all, thank you. And I know that you're going to be dashing off the class shortly. I was remiss in introducing all of our panelists. So you've already met Dr. Silvia Heubach, who's in the Department of Mathematics. We have with us this afternoon Dr. Pamela Regan, a professor in the Department of Psychology, Dr. Krishna Foster, a professor in the Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry, Dr. Elizabeth Torres, a professor in the Department of Biological Sciences. They will be the first of our panelists. We'll have a Q&A, or just I'll ask them a couple of questions so that you can get a chance to know them. And then we will follow those questions with panelist Dr. Daphne Liu, who's in the Department of Mathematics, Dr. Linda Tunstad in the Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry, and Dr. Xin Wen, who's also in the Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry. Our next panelist is Dr. Pamela Regan, Department of Psychology. Dr. Regan?
Hello, everyone. So first of all, there's no way, Sylvia, I can stand on my head and 700 steps would have killed me. It would have killed me because all I've done is eat and drink since we've had COVID. Anyway, so I am so happy to be here today with you all, my colleagues, my students, and to share tiny pieces of my life as a scientist, as a person, as a woman with you. I'm from Los Angeles originally, but I'm so fortunate because education has taken me all over the nation and to many other countries. And I encourage you, travel, travel. Californians never leave. Please leave. Go and explore. I'm a relationship scientist with a particular interest in sexual and romantic attraction, though my interests are broad. And these days I mostly write books. You can see my books over on the right. And I really go empirically where my students lead because I'm tenured. What are they going to do to me? I'm going to go and study whatever I want. The monograph Lust, which is the first book you see on the upper left, is near and dear to my heart because the idea for that book came about during graduate school when I was working on my thesis, which was looking at the sort of unique features of passionate love. And that was the book that, it's old, it's outdated now, but it made my name when I first came out of graduate school and earned me some of my first awards. And here you can see my most beloved dog, Phoebe. All of my students, many of whom are here today, know that I'm a huge dog lover and I spend most of my time with my dog and all my time outside of work with my dog and with other dog people. Now, because I'm a relationship scientist and this is Women's History Month, I wanted to share with you on the next slide some of the strong women who have shaped my life and taught me about persistence. And I can't tell you how much fun, and I want to thank our dean for allowing me to take this trip down memory lane because I had a wonderful time pouring through many old dusty photo albums. In the upper left, I don't have time to tell you how all these women shaped my life because they really did. But Christy in the upper left is my very first master's student here at Cal State LA. That was about 100 pounds ago, I think, for me. So I'm so sad kind of looking at it. She's the first of my master's students to go on and earn a PhD and then enter a tenure track line at an R1, which is a big research institution. And she did earn tenure. And she is still a very close friend of mine. She is the person who taught me really about self-acceptance, about knowing your value and your worth as a person and holding tight to that. I am forever indebted to her. Next, over on the right is my friend Amy, and that's my very first collie, Molly. That was taken my first year in graduate school. Amy grew up very differently. I grew up in urban LA. She grew up on a dirt farm in Iowa. She came from a very abusive family. She is obese and has been her whole life. And we can talk about the way that gender and the obesity stereotype interact to make things particularly challenging for women in today's society. And she was kicked out at 16 and was homeless for a good portion of her life. And she's a lawyer and she has a PhD in social psychology. So really from Amy, she was the first person who taught me the absolute power of education to get you up and to get you out. And I will have never forgotten that very valuable lesson. Down below on the right, you'll see hopefully some familiar faces. Those are my good friends and colleagues, Ramani Durvasula and Kaveri Subramaniam. We all came to Cal State around the same time. And they taught me, this photo really reminds me that friendship and connection can be found anywhere if you look for them, and seek them out. Seek them out because they are what will sustain you through the challenges that you face, and you will face challenges. Over on the left is my mom with she's got some guns on her there, those arms, and me and my very first dog. And I include her because she's the woman she raised 6 kids mostly on her own before she met my dad. We didn't have a lot, but she taught me that everyone was always welcome. She took in every stray kid, every stray dog, every stray hurting adult she came across. And she taught me that there's always room. There's always room at the table. And that's a very valuable lesson. And in the center is Ellen Berscheid. My student, she was my mentor in grad school. My students read a chapter about her particularly challenging life as the first woman scientist to earn a grant to study attraction. And she saved me. I went to grad school actually to study gender stereotyping and gender-based violence. And I went to study with the top person in the field. And without going into detail, he just about broke me and I would have left. And I was leaving when a phone call from Ellen changed my life, changed my world. And she's the only reason I am I have a PhD. So she taught me really that it is very important that we have an ally and that we be an ally for each other. And then over on the right, this photo just makes me laugh because it's my outstanding professor photo. It wasn't posed, we were just laughing. And that is Alana and Curtis, two of my students, and we were laughing about some ridiculous statistics thing. And that photo reminds me about the joy that there is and the collaborative nature of teaching and learning. And it also reminds me that every single one of my own achievements, and this is a photo to celebrate an achievement, but every single one of my achievements is a shared achievement and simply couldn't have been accomplished without all of you, without my friends, my family, my students, my colleagues, really above all my students, and also my dogs. So thank you for this little quick journey down memory lane with me, and I hope that you find today's presentation educational and inspirational, and I wish all of you successes in your own journeys.
Thank you, Dr. Regan. Our next presenter is Dr. Krishna Foster. Dr. Foster.
Hello, everybody. I didn't make a slide, but I do have some thoughts that I've written down, so let me introduce. I'm Dr. Krishna Foster, and you might know me as a professor of chemistry, associate chair of the Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry, and co-director of the Minority Opportunities in Research programs. You probably don't know that I'm the daughter of a professor. I'm a second-generation professor. I'm a former African dancer. I'm the mother of two, and I love to compete in obstacle courses. So those are the perks you get to know me from coming to this meeting. So my experiences in science have reinforced my innate inquisition. I'm very inquisitive in nature. I consider myself creative, and I tend to dream really big. Dream big for social change really is what I do. So I'm honored to have this position because it allows me to work towards equity in higher education. And not a lot of people get that opportunity. So I'm thankful for that. Years ago, I went to the high Arctic. It's cold up there. It's terribly cold. It can kill you cold. But I went there because I'm really passionate about air quality and using science to explore air quality. And the work that I do in my laboratory is still related to the work I was doing some 20 years ago in the high Arctic. And so when I reflect on my journey, I wouldn't change a thing. I can't picture myself as anything else but a scientist in academics. It fits who I am innately to the core. And I'm very happy to have this position, or I could say positions, right? But I've overcome obstacles to get here. Of course, many obstacles. Just some of the quotes from people in my pathway. Somebody I really trusted and cared about said, I don't think you'd make a very good professor. I think you'd make a really good lobbyist in DC. Why don't you go be a lobbyist? All right. And so that kind of makes you spin. And then someone else was just really angry. I mean, they were screaming. I've had people scream and wave their fingers at me. I can't know how many times. But this one was screaming and waving their finger, telling me not to work at Cal State LA, saying you should work at a PhD granting institution. And how could you throw away your pedigree and work at Cal State? You got to do what you want to do. And I am happy because I made choices to do what I want to do. Again, wouldn't change a thing. I love my position and I am keeping my remarks short so I have time to talk to you. So I hope to share more as we speak.
Thank you, Dr. Foster. Our next presenter is Dr. Elizabeth Torres. Dr. Torres?
Hey, thank you. So I was born and mostly raised in San Pedro, which is part of Los Angeles, down in the LA harbor. And I am one of 6 kids in my family, first generation college student. My parents always valued education and they sent us to, all of us, to private Catholic school for elementary school. But then when I was going into 9th grade, I moved to a small farming town in Arizona. My dad was originally from Arizona and it was always his dream to go back there. So in high school, I loved biology class. I also loved writing, and I ended up going to Arizona State University, where I fell in love even more with biology. And I had professors who were encouraging me to go to graduate school, but I knew absolutely nothing about it. I had no idea what that meant. I feel like the only thing I knew at that point was that I wanted to get out of Arizona and go back to California. So I did an internship at USC's Marine Lab the summer after graduation. And then I really struggled to get my first job in science, which was at a clinical lab. And I think that was one of the toughest times in my life, was that transition out of undergrad into finding a job. So after working for about a year, I decided to go ahead and apply to a PhD program. And I applied to UCLA and I got in, which was very exciting. And so I did my PhD at UCLA, 5.5 years, where I learned how to scuba dive and started doing research in the Caribbean on little crustaceans that glow in the dark. So got to go to a lot of new places and, learn new skills like scuba diving. I never thought I would be doing that. And so after I finished my PhD, I took another big leap and I moved to New York City and spent 2 years in a postdoc at the American Museum of Natural History. And for me, that was a huge move, being that far away from my immediate family. But because my family is so huge, I actually had a cousin in New York City that I lived with and a brother nearby in New Jersey. So after those 2 years in New York, I applied for my job at Cal State LA and got the job. And I've been there ever since 1998. And on the bottom left-hand corner, there's a picture there of me and my husband and my daughter and our little dog. And so I didn't have my daughter until I was close to 40 years old. And got married in my late 30s. So that was a major life shift as well. I'll take the next slide, please. So this slide is more about like my research. So I do research in the Caribbean, which is wonderful. I've traveled to a lot of places. I also love local projects. I love the tide pools and things like that. I'm still in touch with my mentors who are up in the upper left-hand corner. That was a few years ago at a marine lab in San Francisco. We took that picture where we're the little algae, some of the former students, and then those are my mentors. Bottom left, one of my Cal State LA grad students who went on to earn a PhD at Harvard, and she's there working with my mentor. In the middle, some of my undergraduate students, and that's been really, I think, the best part of my job is working with students, and I absolutely love it. So I think that's it for me.
Great. Thank you, colleagues. I'm going to ask a few questions so that we can get to know a little bit more about you. So the first question I'll ask, and just so the audience knows, we're not trying to play got you. So our faculty colleagues did get some of these questions. But the first one I'm going to ask is, how does your personal mission align with the institution that you now find yourself working in? How does your personal mission align with the mission of Cal State LA? Sure. Silvia, why don't you take that question?
Well, so like Elizabeth said, one makes choices, and I made a choice to be at a teaching institution because I wanted to teach and work with students. I believe that everybody can learn math. You may not become a genius, but you can get better if you have someone who encourages you and also helps you think about math not as I can do it, but it's something I can get better at. And Cal State is an institution that allows me to work with students on research. And what resonated with me is that a lot of the students are the first in their family to go to college. And the upward mobility that a college degree confers is really something that's near and dear to my heart. And I am in awe of the students that we have. They do so much besides school. When I was a student, yes, I was working as a TA or whatnot, but I didn't really have to worry about supporting my family or working a full-time job, and being there to help them with their school so that they can get to a place where they can support their family better and start a new life. That's really important.
Good. Other colleagues want to answer that? Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Foster. And you know, you would have thought that I pulled this right out of your introduction, but I'd love for
No,
you to
but
answer that.
yeah, I can elaborate, is that this institution really does align with my values and what I would like to do with my job. In that, when I was back in high school, I was very concerned and drawn towards STEM because in my physics and calculus classes, there was a handful of girls and no other people of color. And so I said, what's going on here? There has to be something good over there if it's not diverse. And so I just kept pushing in that direction. I like to push boundaries. And so at Cal State LA, we push boundaries and we find ways to make pathways for students who are not necessarily the ones that were pictured when you said this is higher education, right? We make this pathway into the higher socioeconomic brackets for our students, our community students, and that is deep. My family, my mother had death threats for her activism in the 60s and 70s, right? And so this is who we are, and this is who I still am. I say we family, but Cal State LA is activism through academics. That's what it should be, activism through academics. And so I'm part of that.
Well, it sounds like we should have a new mission: activism through academics. So I would like to kind of move to the next, another question, and then we'll see if any of the audiences might have a question or two as we move to the next section. So when many of us started our college careers, there were fewer women in college in general, certainly fewer women in our fields. And I often think about what a genderized educational experience looks like. Any thoughts on that? And I'll as you're formulating your thoughts on what a genderized educational experience could be, we've spent the last year really thinking more and more about inclusiveness, equity, and diversity. And right now, when I look at the data across the country, upwards of 65% of our colleges and universities have women in it. Now, I will start off by saying I went to an all women's college. In fact, Dr. Foster and I both went to Spelman as undergraduates. So I didn't really have a sense that there was an issue because I was in the middle of a very strong activist mother in South Carolina, going to a college institution that really promoted and facilitated women in their disciplines and as leaders. And then I now look at the data from not only in our college, but across the country, and more women are in college now than before. What's your thoughts about a genderized educational experience? How should we think about that? Should we be looking at the foundations of our disciplines and our educational environments? Yes, Dr. Regan.
So just a couple thoughts. Certainly things are different now. So when I was a double major, math and English at Williams College, which is a very elite private school back east. And I didn't finish my double major in math because my undergraduate advisor, who was a physics professor, said girls can't do physics, but English is great for girls. And I did not accept that. I mean, I did accept it, excuse me, because I just never thought about these issues, I'll be honest with you. I was raised by a strong woman. I thought the sky was the limit for me. And it was really only later that I learned it really wasn't, that we have to push those boundaries. I would like everyone here to think we are in a College of Natural and Social Sciences. It's something that I think a lot about is how in this genderized environment, an environment in which we often provide labs for our male colleagues. I didn't get a lab when I came to Cal State. I got a job and I was told I was lucky to get it. And I was kind of a bigwig in my area, so I didn't think that was right, but I was desperate to come home. So I took it. And the next year when we hired a male colleague, I got half his lab space. That's how I got my lab. So there definitely gender plays a role in things, but I'm also in psychology, and some of the most cutting remarks that I have heard that have to do sort of with gender have come from some of my colleagues in the quote unquote hard or natural sciences. This idea that because I'm in psychology, it's soft, it's not real, it's not as valuable as some of the other sciences. And that has bothered me. It bothers my students, no longer bothers me because I recognize that what I study is harder. It's harder to scientize human behavior. It really is. But we use hard and soft, which are gendered. We use natural, and male is sort of the natural order of things. In many cases, I'm sort of going off tangent with all these ideas, but it has consistently sort of bothered me that sometimes when women go into a field, and psychology is primarily female, it's primarily a female major, it loses value. We've got to be really careful not to do that to each other, to recognize that having women in any major is valuable. And even if it's primarily a female major, which is not in most of STEM, primarily male, but don't discount the valuable things that women are doing in these so-called soft, because we tend to use an understanding of science that is predicated on the sort of Baconian, Descartesian model of science that doesn't actually work with human behavior. We need to be evaluated by a different rubric, and we should be, and we should not discount the contributions of women in a primarily female area. So I've gone terribly off topic. I apologize, but
Okay,
that's something I want to say.
I asked a question that was only partially pre-given to you. Anybody else want to jump into this thought that I'm putting on the floor about a genderized environment? And part of that is most of the foundations of our discipline were not created by or for women. Not that we were deliberately always excluded. They weren't created necessarily by Black women. You know, I consider myself a Black woman. And so, Dr. Foster, thoughts on this? I see your hand up.
Yeah, I think that we treat women in science, women in academics, and in our classrooms the same way we treat other minoritized populations. Even if statistically there's more, the institution wasn't necessarily designed for the good girl, right? There are things you're taught to do that don't match science at all. Sit down and be quiet. That doesn't work in science. A healthy argument is required. So how do you train, right? We're instructors. How do you train people that these behaviors that are new to them are okay and celebrated? So healthy discourse is one of the things that should be thought about when you're dealing with women, because they may or may not, but likely don't have the experience.
Dr. Torres, some thoughts on this, particularly as a marine biologist and a person in your field, some thoughts about the genderization of our environment and how we should be thinking about this?
Well, I was just thinking about my experience, and as an undergrad at ASU and a graduate student at UCLA, I really did not have very many, almost all of my professors were males. And so that was one thing that I really, really liked about Cal State LA and my department, is that it's probably about equal representation in the department, and a real understanding of that you have families in your lives and things like that. And so that's something I think about when I send my graduate students out to other programs, is that we're in this almost like a bubble, right? experience, and when you leave, you may find that you're not as comfortable for a variety of reasons related to gender, or it could be ethnicity, it could be economic situations, all sorts of different things. And so I agree, it's a different world right now than it was when I was a student so many years ago. But maybe it's not so different in some places still. It's just something to think about.
Dr. Heubach, I know you and I've talked about this in terms of math, not necessarily the genderization, but how we kind of expand the worlds of quantitative reasoning to have women think about themselves as being part of this field and what we might do. Any thoughts you want to share as we go to the next question? Unmute.
Well, I think, for me, it's when I look at women in math in the US, and, there is women, yes, the stereotype of women can't do math, but there are so many men who also think they can't do math. So I think in the US, there's really more this math gene problem that, math is something that you either have or don't have. And so I think looking at this is a discipline that you can get better at when you work at it is actually something that in math, it's sort of a divided situation. You go teach engineering calculus classes, lots of men. You teach biology calculus classes, mostly women, or a much larger percent of women. And those are classes that I teach. And so I try to instill in my students that, hey, this is something you can get better at, and that math is important and models are there everywhere. And so thinking about math not as this separate subject, but something that you encounter every day once you open your eyes to it. I don't know. That's all I can say about that topic.
So my last question for the panel before we go to the next panel really has to do with our thinking about where do we go from here. So we've been in a conversation about how to make things better, and that's just that's a kind of hodgepodge of words for our students. So I'd like each of you to think about a barrier that really, I know this is going to be in a recording, but that just pissed you off, made you so mad that you're like, not only am I going to knock it out of the park, but I'm going to make sure that this doesn't happen to the people, to the next generation. What would that be? What was that thing that kind of got under your craw and really motivated you? And that when you had an opportunity to be in that position, and each of you represents a position of power, that you were going to ensure that you provided a cushion or access in ways that were not provided for you when that thing or that event or that whatever occurred for you. Thoughts on that? Is that a hopefully I'm being clear in that question. Probably you're like, oh my God, no, she didn't ask that.
No, you're clear. It's just that I think probably all of us, everyone will experience major obstacles, and some of them are internal and some of them are really horrible external things,
But so we all have these things that are horrible things that happen to us, but then you make decisions. Certainly as a psychologist, you make either conscious or unconscious decisions. But what was the conscious thing that you said, you know what, if I ever become a college professor or a supervisor or X, I'm going to make sure that either this doesn't happen or I'm going to make sure that this thing does happen? Anything like that? Yeah, Elizabeth, Beth?
Well, I was thinking about when I was a graduate student in the PhD program, and one of the things that we would do is we would mentor undergraduate students, right, that would come to the lab. And I think I just started to want to mentor students that were like me, who weren't necessarily the 4.0 student or had the most experience or had the utmost confidence. And so I feel like I've always kind of carried that through. And I think that I'm glad that I saw that way back then. I didn't know what I was doing at the time. But I think taking a chance on people that, you know, might not normally stand out if you're just looking at a stack of papers and at a GPA and a, you know, not everybody gets to have a deep research experience before they apply for a program, and everybody needs to get their start somewhere in science. And so I think that I try to keep that in mind.
Cool. Sylvia, your mic is open.
Oh, I did not, I just didn't close it after the last one. But, since I'm talking, I didn't really have an experience that made me mad like that. I had somebody telling me once, oh, women in math, it's two different worlds. This was in the hotel. And I was just standing there and thinking, sooner or later, you're going to ask me what I'm studying. And then you will just have dug your hole deeper and deeper and deeper. And sure enough, he'll say, so what are you studying now? Oh, math and computer science. And oh, yeah, exception. And I was smiling the whole time inwardly. So I didn't have, either I didn't hear it, or I didn't have people who said, you cannot do this. Or I was just so convinced I could that, I just blended out the other things. But I think in terms of mentoring, where I tried to do some things where I thought, I didn't have somebody who helped me with that, writing letters when you apply for an RAU or to graduate school or whatnot. When students come ask me for a letter of recommendation, I say, well, send me your statement letter and your CV, and then let me have a look at it and give you some guidance, because very often it's the first time they write anything. They have nobody can help them with that, just like I didn't have anybody who could guide me. And so that's something that, not something that made me angry, but something where I feel like that was missing for me and I want to provide them.
Dr. Foster?
I feel like one of the things, and it's difficult to say why people do things to you, and I try not to overthink it, but I get really frustrated with being dismissed. It happens less now that I've been here for 20 years, but throughout my career, I've been completely dismissed. I feel invisible in one situation after the other. And I'm really excited by these rules of engagement. So when a meeting is facilitated for conversation, there are rules of engagement for conversation, which will allow everybody to develop their voice. And so this is something that is easy. And I really think this, combined with the remote instruction discussion boards, I have more students participating than ever. This is one silver lining out of this mode, is finding ways for people to publicly use their voice. It doesn't have to be the loudest one in a room, right? Which can make some people never heard, never. Rules of engagement.
Thank you. Pamela?
So just quickly, I love what you said, Krishna. That's so true. That is one of the best things that's come out of COVID, is the fact that we have huge participation, and we have an opportunity for everyone to participate and be heard. And that's so important. We've all had issues, and there are some things that we've maybe experienced at the hands of mentors that are just not going to share publicly because they were awful, maybe illegal. But for me, I had a really valuable learning experience when I was I spent a year at Dominguez Hills, where my dad teaches or taught, chemistry professor. And I had come from a really elite private school that my parents saved a lot of money up to send me to. And when you're at one of those schools, you have a tendency to think that that's how education should look like. That's how it should be. And it's wonderful. If you get a chance to experience that, it is freaking fabulous. And then I came home and I went to Dominguez, and I was horrified because I thought the classes were so easy and the professors were so bad. And I was so negative about it. And by the end of the year though, I saw, because was surrounded by all these different students. And I attended a graduation with one of my classmates who was in his late 50s and had gone back to school. He was kind of an average student. And his parents, his 80-year-old parents, were there crying at his graduation. And that moment stood out to me. I actually get a little emotional when I think back to it. I'm still sort of in touch with him. He's really old now, but because that was the first time that I actually really learned that there are many ways to become, and I was young, and as you get older, this is also a benefit of aging, is you hopefully get a little wiser. But that was the first time that I realized that education didn't have to follow a particular form. It didn't have to look a particular way, and that there was value in it no matter how you do it. And that is something I want to remind everyone here today. You can be an autodidact. All of us, education is not just something that happens at school. It's something that happens in the world. So please take charge of your own education. And I think for many of us, one of the reasons I wanted to come back here and did not take a different job, but came back to a Cal State, was because I truly believe that education is for everyone. It's not just private, it's not just public, it's not just in four walls, it's not just at home. It's for all of us, students, teachers, everyone. And being part of this is exciting for me, and I would rather be here than anywhere else. I feel so happy to be at Cal State, and I have learned so much from the Cal State system, and I have appreciated so much the value of education in a way that I never did until I joined at Cal State and attended as a student at Cal State. So thank you all, because you've been part of my education.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, colleagues. We want to thank Dr. Krishna Foster, Dr. Silvia Heubach, Dr. Pamela Regan, and Dr. Elizabeth Torres for sharing parts of their lives, letting us know a little bit something that if you hadn't come to this session, you wouldn't have known about our colleagues' lives. Thank you for sharing your perspectives with us. Please do stick around. We're going to go to our second panelist. If there are quick questions in the chat, put them down. But again, let's just give them a round of applause and a big thank you for being with us. And we'll see you at the next part of this. Thank you, colleagues. Okay, so our next presenter is Dr. Daphne Liu, who is a member of the Department of Mathematics. Dr. Liu?
Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. It is my great honor to be on this event, to be included. I want to share some stories about me. I'm the first generation in my family completing a college degree. My parents were refugees of the Chinese Revolution. Their education was interrupted by the war. I was born and raised in Taiwan. I grew up in a poor but very loving family. Education was always the top priority in my family. My father later on became very successful. He always reminded us not to be afraid of any suffering or hardship, because he said all those things will only make a person stronger. He said that only the people who conquer hardship and work hard will succeed. My parents always reminded us to be conscious and to do good deeds to other people. Till now, those words are still very strong and deep in my mind. So next slide, please. At college, I took a graph theory class with Professor Chen. He's on the left top corner. I was very deeply attracted by the passion of the professor for students learning, and also the content of the course. My homework usually differed from others because I always like to try other methods to attack a math problem. Professor Chen always graded my homework the first and asked the class to look at my work. That was a great encouragement for me. to be creative. It also ensured me it's okay to be different from others. I also attended a talk by the world famous nuclear scientist, Madame Wu, who's also known as the First Lady of Physics, and the Chinese Madame Curie. Yeah, her speech deeply, profoundly inspired me. And then after college, I went to Academia Sinica as a research assistant for 2 years. I had some of the most challenging and rigorous research training that one can imagine. I almost cried every day. My father's words helped me to conquer those barriers. And he was right. I became stronger after that training. And I decided to go to US to get a PhD because I wanted to be a researcher. So the PhD life are some of the best time in my life. I really enjoy those times. And I think it's also because I had the rigorous training before. So it was relatively easier for me. Also, when I was a TA at PhD study, I found my passion for teaching. So I decided to, oh yeah, on the top corner, that's my advisor. He's also encouraged me to be myself, to have my, to be creative. I'm very fortunate to have my advisor, very supportive to me. So being a TA, I found my passion for teaching. So I decided to have a career that's focused on teaching and research. So after college, I came to Cal State LA, which is really a blessing for me to pursue my passion for being a teacher, a mentor, and a researcher. So this little graph here is a graph theory, okay, which has a lot of application in the real world. And I created a graph theory class 20 years ago. I hope I can assist students to realize the beauty of mathematics and their ability in mathematics. So this picture, bottom picture, was students, my research students in my group. They were very awesome. This was at the student symposium with, you can see Dr. Dean Scott Johnson is always was also there. Yeah, we're very happy. Yeah, I'm very proud of my students. I wish I can help them as my mentors did to me. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Liu. Our next presenter is Dr. Linda Tunstad. Dr. Tunstad?
Good afternoon, everyone. So my slides tell you a little bit about where I did my growing up and where my family of origin and the family that I live with now, and where I went to school at the various locations. So this is a picture down here in the corner of my mother in the center. Last February 8th, a day after her 91st birthday, we celebrated at my house. And these are 4 of my sisters and 1 of my brothers. There are several people missing from this picture. I am her 5th child. My oldest brother and sister were born in Mexico, where my mother came from. And the rest of the clan was born in Los Angeles. And so I'm very grateful that we were able to celebrate her birthday because a month later was quarantine, and I really miss our family get-togethers to celebrate. So I was raised in Los Angeles near Echo Park. This is a picture of Echo Park near downtown Los Angeles. So there's fond memories. The area has changed a lot since the time I grew up there. And I grew up in a mixed neighborhood, lots of different cultures represented in my neighborhood. And We may have been the only Mexican American family on that street. I can't recall exactly, but we had quite a mix. So I went to Lincoln High School, which is not too far from Cal State LA. And I wound up at Cal State LA as a biology major because I was interested in perhaps going into dentistry. And while I was there, I had to take all of the required courses for a biology major, including chemistry, and I started to move in that direction. And so took a little break to go to work for a while to earn some money, and came back a few months later as an evening student, and that didn't work out very well. So I came back full time and decided that being poor was temporary. So I came back and switched majors to chemistry, and I had some wonderful mentors along the way who said that I should not stop at the bachelor's degree. I got involved in research in a couple of different laboratories. And again, it was certain mentors who were very encouraging. At that time, I think there were 2 women on the faculty, and then that went down to 1. And then, so the mentors were mostly the male mentors. And I do appreciate a lot of that support. I was also involved in research training programs at that point. And so with my degree, I applied to various graduate schools and was accepted at UCLA, and joined a laboratory. I actually joined 2 laboratories, one first, and then I had to move labs because unfortunately, my research mentor passed away. He was in his 40s, and that was a shock to the system. It was a heart attack. And so I moved down the hall to Donald Cram's laboratory. He was a senior scientist at that point, and a few years later, while I was in his laboratory, he won the Nobel Prize in chemistry, shared it with a couple of other chemists. And that was, as you can imagine, a stratospheric type of event for anyone. And it showed me what research was like at the top levels in organic chemistry. And of course, according to these people over here, you're never done. According to the people at Cal State LA, you're never done. And so I applied to UC Berkeley for a postdoctoral fellowship. I was awarded a postdoctoral fellowship from the Cooley's Anemia Foundation. My group here was working on iron sequestration, so some molecules that grab onto iron. And the Bay Area is such a lovely place. I really enjoyed it. And it was great to, as Pamela Regan said, to move out of Los Angeles for a while. It was quite the experience. I love the Bay Area. Very expensive, I'll say that, but it's a lovely place. And so this is my family here. And some of you may recognize this fellow here, who's my colleague as well. My daughter, my son, who is a foot taller now, and Naomi, our daughter, who lives in the Bay Area. Next slide. And so at Cal State LA, I got to come back to Cal State LA after my postdoc, and I was hired, and I get to do what Cal State LA does best, and that is work with the students and show them the opportunities that are available, recognize their talents, and support them as they choose their pathways forward. So there's a poster session. I'm in, of course, now co-director of the MORE programs at Cal State LA. And we provide support through grants for research training through the NIH. And we helped the students with their development. So presenting posters locally at our organized meetings and at national conferences. And we do this so that the students can develop their potentials and move to the highest levels that they choose to move to. So all of these students, this picture was taken a couple of years ago, all of them are in PhD programs at this point. And Jonty is a master's student who has been accepted, so he will be at UC Riverside in the fall. He is also now in Dr. Volanowit's group. And here is this fellow who is at UC Davis on his graduation day at UCLA, sorry, at Cal State LA. And so everything really surrounds Cal State LA, whether it's where I grew up, where I went to school, or where I now work as a professor and a director of training programs. So that's it.
Thank you, Dr. Tunstad. Our last presenter is Dr. Xin Wen. Dr. Wen, Department
Yes.
of Chemistry and Biochemistry. I'm sorry.
Thank you for your introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. It is my great pleasure and honor to share my story with you this afternoon. Though I'm the only child in my family, I grew up with my cousins whose family lived very close to ours, and they are all boys. So naturally, all my friends at school are all girls. So I was inspired by female scientists, and my STEM career awareness started around my middle school time, which intrigued by my science teachers. And at one time, all my math and science teachers are female. So and in my school district, but I quit the biology camp because the other girl dropped out from the camp, and I became the only girl in the biology camp. There were more than 50 boys and a male teacher. So boys actually made fun of me on everything I did in the camp. So this so I quitted. But luckily in the chemistry camp, I had one girl to accompany me. So in fact, during my journey, lacking interactions with other women in the STEM area, these have been big challenges. Yeah, of course, this is due to the inequality of the number of women in STEM area. So I went to University of Rochester for my PhD, where I chose Dr. Carrie Brand, who was then an assistant professor and the only female professor in the chemistry department. I was intrigued by her research on cytochrome C. She used a lot of different techniques and methods to study molecular structure and the electronic structure of cytochrome C. And her lab had the most number of female grad students and undergrad students in the department. I learned a wide range of skills in Dr. Brand's lab, and were trained by Dr. Brand and 3 female senior grad students. They were Beth, Brandy, and Curtie. They were very
Dr. Wen, did we lose you?
Yeah, I think we lost.
Yeah, we'll give her an opportunity to come back on whenever she comes back on. But I will start the questions at the moment, and she'll come back on. So I'm going to ask you colleagues the same, at least 2 of the same questions that I asked our colleagues before. How does your personal professional mission align with the mission of Cal State LA? Dr. Tunstad? And Dr. Liu?
I think,
ahead.
yeah, you can go first.
No, go ahead, Dr. Liu. I think Dr. Tunstad, your mic is muted. Dr. Liu,
Oh.
since your mic is hot, go ahead and then we'll come to Dr. Tunstad. And as soon as Dr. Wen gets back in, we'll let her finish up her presentation.
Right. I think being at Cal State LA is really a privilege for me. It totally aligned with my personal, career goal. I like to assist students realize their ability in mathematics. And I feel like privileged because here the students, the longer I stay here, the more privileged I feel I am because I learned a lot of amazing stories from students. They have to overcome so many difficulties in order to come to the classroom. So I feel like I have to give them the best. I really think so I'm, so I think it's great. I have this opportunity to be able to assist them, to facilitate their learning and their education, to help them to fulfill their dreams.
Great. Thank you. Dr. Tunstad, before we have you respond, we want to make sure that Dr. Wen has a chance to finish her presentation and give us a little bit about her. Thank you so much. Dr. Wen?
Hi, sorry about.
Oh, no problem. We're waiting for
internet.
you.
Yeah. So yeah, I talked about my experience at the University of Rochester. Then yeah, I came to Johns Hopkins. I did my postdoc with Dr. Doug Barrick in biophysics. I was interested in his research on protein and protein interactions in notch signaling. And Dr. Barrick's lab had the most number of female grad students in the department at the time. And actually one of his grad students had 2 babies during her PhD. And Dr. Barrick's wife is also a professor at Johns Hopkins. He treated me as a future scientist. So yeah, I felt I was really lucky. And after my postdoc, I chose to join the faculty in the Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry at Cal State LA. Yeah, this is the institute I have visited, had the most number of women chemists I had seen. Because most of the chemistry department, at that time, there were no female chemists. Yeah, and or just only one. So at the time, we had Dr. Tunstad, Dr. Foster, and Dr. McCurdy. And Dr. Foster and Dr. Tunstad are here today. They gave me lots of supports, both professionally and personally during my early years. And very luckily, during my early years at CASLA, I also met Dr. Geraldine Richmond, who is a chemistry professor at the University of Oregon. And she is the PI of ASF Coach program. So Coach is the committee on the advancement of women chemists. So she invited me to participate in the coach workshops, which helped me to develop my professional skills during my early of tenure track in achieving my career potential. So in fact, our department is continuing our tradition in supporting female faculty. So now we have 3 more women chemists, Dr. Zurita Lopez, Dr. Wen, and Dr. Liu. So I recommend the coach program to all of them, and 2 of them had already participated in the coach workshops during their first year at CASLA. So based on my journey, I would say for female students to start out their journey is to interact with the more women in STEM. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Wen. And so we started to ask the panel, about how their personal and professional missions align with the mission of Cal State LA. And Dr. Tunstad is going to answer that, and then we'll give you an opportunity to answer that as well, Dr. Wen. Dr. Tunstad?
Yeah, so I have the privilege of being an alumna of Cal State LA, of having been mentored by Cal State LA mentors, and especially in chemistry and biochemistry, and moving in that direction because of my natural affinity towards the subject. And so I feel like I'm continuing the mission that many of them had in mind at the time that I was a student. I get to recognize the potential in students and encourage it, and to see them blossom and to move farther than they had ever thought about previously is really gratifying work. It's the work I do as part of the MORE programs. It's work I do in my research laboratory. And so I see that that it's a continuation, and it's getting better, because there was a time when I was the only female faculty member in our department after the other two had left. And so the things are moving in the right direction, and it aligns really well. I do want to say that at UCLA, when I started graduate school, there was one female faculty member in the entire chemistry and biochemistry. And these days there are a lot more. It still needs some work, but it's a lot more. And so I'm glad for that trend. But as Dr. Wen said, here at Cal State LA, the trend in chemistry, and it's been deliberate on the part of the faculty to advocate for women and for underrepresented folks. And so that was deliberate. That didn't just happen. We looked for talented individuals who could better represent the students in our very diverse campus. And I'm glad to be here.
Thank you, Dr. Tunstad. Dr. Wen, your thoughts on your professional and personal mission and its alignment with the Cal State LA mission?
Yes, so I think that, yeah, as I mentioned earlier, networking is very important, and I would also like to include everybody in education and research training. So I embrace my students by listening to their stories, learning about their cultural backgrounds and social communities, and incorporating the right environment in the classroom and research laboratory, so that this is just create a community in education and in research. So my mission is also to impact more underrepresented group of people, because through my own experience.
I think we've all experienced the frozen and unstable internets. Mine just happens to be stable at the moment. So whenever she comes back, we'll have her finish her answers. I will ask you the other question that I asked of our previous panelists, and that is about the genderization of our curriculum and our educational experiences. Any thoughts on that, particularly since, and I love how you described this, Linda, in that it was not, it was deliberate that we began to train more women to be able to focus on ethnic minority participation in STEM. And so we do have, more participation, not quite what we want, but any thoughts on the genderization of our curriculum and what that might look like if we're there yet? Your thoughts, yours and Dr. Liu's, and Dr. Wen will come back and I'll look for her as she comes back on.
I think there's some stereotype things. I remember when my daughter was in junior high, one day she came back and asked me, she almost cried, and asking me why girls cannot do good in math. I asked her, who told you that? Your mom is a math person? and she said, why people think that way? She's just junior high. So she heard this from school or sensed this. So I comforted her. I ensure her that women can do well in math. Indeed, I think girls are more visual. Study shows that girls can do better in geometry. I'm a very visual person. And so graph theory is perfect for me. I like to visualize. So when among my friends also, they sometimes ask me about their girls, why math, they are not good in math. I told them, no, it's not true. They have a good ability. So I feel like in personal, I always take any opportunity I have to tell people, girls can do well in math. Indeed, junior high can do well, I think probably at high school, because they're discouraged too much already, the girls. So they don't perform that well. So I feel like it's something rooted deeper. For me, what I can do is, again, I want to be a role model for my students, especially female students. One time I taught a graduate course, they are all male students. I was the only female who's the instructor. That's possible. I feel I'm still positive. I think little by little, we can make a difference. Yeah, our department now have like almost half of female faculty members. When I joined, I was the only one. Oh, there were two, but the other female faculty almost close to retirement. I was the only one of there were 35 faculty members. We're a big department, math and computer science. It was so tough for me. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I had to create a network outside of department with female faculty members. So mm-hmm. I think a little by little, now it's getting better. So like a chemistry department, yeah. So yeah.
Thank you. Dr. Tunstad?
Yeah, so when I was a student, there were always other women students, and I think many of them were thinking about the health professions. I didn't really pay that much attention to the gender ratios, either in the faculty or with the students, because I have 3 older brothers. And frankly, there were always men around, and I felt comfortable to move in that environment and to make sure that my needs were met, and to ask for what I needed. And there, I got to say, the mentors. There's a question in the chat about mentors. I think you have to go and ask. And I think people can be very, very helpful, but you just need to know how to ask for help, even just in office hours or with anything else. But I think the important part about faculty is to recognize the potential that students have and let them know that you see that potential. And whether they're women or men, because I think a lot of men also feel maybe that chemistry is not right for them, or this is something foreign to them. But if you see potential on the page in their exams and their written work, and you let them know, that can change someone's life as well. And I have examples of that. So while I think there are still barriers at R01 institutions that they're working on in terms of the percent of faculty that are women compared to the percent of the graduate students that are women. I think that on our campus, all of us women faculty serve as role models for our women students to see what is possible in terms of what we do. I think the more interesting thing is how we chose it, right? How we chose it out of all the possibilities that there were, and why some of us may have wound up in more male-dominated fields. I, for one, was not really aware that organic chemistry was a male-dominated field. It still is. I just liked it, and I moved in that direction. And there was sufficient support for me once I did realize that fact. There was sufficient support that I could lean on and ignore the rest. And I think that was one of the questions in the chat. How do you deal with that? I think you have to just lean into the folks that are supportive, because not everyone will be. You'll have some people who are neutral, dismissive, and others who you can feel their support. And those are the ones we want the students to lean into and feel like they have the potential to move further.
Thank you, Dr. Tunstad. We want to give Dr. Wen a chance to finish her responses, not only to her own personal professional mission, but also to think about the genderization of our environment now. Dr. Wen, did we get her back?
Yes, thank you. And I'm so sorry about today's problem.
Oh no, we've been in a Zoom world for the last year, so no apologies needed. We're just happy to have you back with us. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, so I try to play a role in my education and in my teaching and the research laboratory. So I try to create a community that don't let a student to feel that they were left alone, or because of my own personal experience.
We'll get her back, and maybe we'll have an opportunity to have her give us some words at the end. But we'll continue to kind of go on. So Dr. Liu and Dr. Tunstad, give me your thoughts. I did ask the other panelists, what was that thing that kind of gave them motivation? Basically, you said to yourself that I'm either going to make that available to someone else, or I'm never going to let that thing happen to someone else that happened to me. Any thoughts on that you would share?
So maybe I mentioned that when I joined CalCRA, I was the only one of the 2 female faculty member in my department of 35 faculty members, and the other female faculty who just came and taught and then went home. So I felt like very lost in the first couple of years, maybe 3 years. But fortunately, there was like a current director of the current CITO program. She was very kind to me, and she kind of cultivated a network of faculty who came the same year. So I got my network with faculty Linda Beamer from marketing and Mika Chow from art, and other faculty members that we became very good friends. So I think it's so if I think back, when we have a more faculty member like Silvia, she came in probably 2 years after me. I always wanted to share with my experience with her. And so I don't want that happen to any new faculty member. So I wanted to reach out to new faculty member, no matter what's female or male, but mostly female faculty member. I want to make sure that they don't get what I had before.
Dr. Tunstad?
Yeah, I went to UCLA and where there was only one female faculty member, and then to UC Berkeley for a postdoc where there were very few women in faculty positions. And I saw, I wasn't necessarily going to apply to Cal State LA, but I was asked to apply by Professor Fratiello, Professor Garcia. I was approached to apply for a position there, and I thought that that would not be allowed because my spouse was on the faculty. But they said that was old thinking, that was no longer applicable. And if you look around to a lot of chemistry departments, there are plenty of married couples in those departments, and there's a good reason for that. It's because we spend so much time at our work. That's where you meet people. And so many graduate students, when they get married, they move as a couple to a certain university. It happens. And now a lot of universities, to their credit, are making accommodations to support both people in that couple so that they can have the best of both. And so I was asked to apply. And I think at that time, the tide was starting to turn, because when I was in graduate school, the first year I was in graduate school, they had a women in chemistry get together, a sort of a potluck at the home of one of the staff people there at the university in the department. And one of the reasons they had this potluck for women in chemistry was because the previous year, all 6 of the women graduate students who started dropped out, all of them. They had none left. And so they were trying to get a support group going so that the women felt like they could do their graduate work and finish. And so by the time I got to Cal State LA and I was asked to apply for the position, for the full-time position, I was at first reluctant, but I realized that departments seemed to be trying to encourage women to apply, that they would be supportive and not make it difficult for people to feel even welcome. So at that point, I really felt the support. Plus, remember, I was a former student. And many, many, many of the faculty, mostly men, were still there. And they welcomed me. They supported me. They worked me really hard and got me involved in all kinds of different projects. And I'm very thankful to the organic division, but to many others who went out of their way to make sure that I stayed on track and did the things I was supposed to do to be successful. So they were mostly not women faculty, because there were none at the time. There was a couple, but they were coming and going, and then they were gone. But I credit them all for creating an environment where the person that they chose to hire, they wanted to make sure that person would be successful and knew how to navigate through. And that felt really good. It felt like a welcoming and supportive environment. Not that we didn't all work on 6 days a week, but it was clear that they wanted their new hires to be successful.
Great, thank you. Dr. Wen, any thoughts that you want to share with us, either about your mission, about ways in which you have facilitated your students. You've shared some of that with us, but I want to make sure that we complete what you have to say about this. And then I'm going to take a couple of the questions from the chat and we'll open it up to all of our panelists.
Thank you. Yeah, so sorry about the interruptions. I think, I changed something into my education and my research since I firstly hired, because I try to also educate students to think bigger and envision about what they would like to be in their future careers and also their lives, and to communicate with other people, which is very important because some of the time we lack of communication and then could make a student to be less confidence and drop out of the program. So this is also to improve their
Well, we'll give her a few minutes. One of the questions in the chat, and any of our panelists can respond to this, is about imposter syndrome. Did you experience it? And how did you overcome imposter syndrome? And I think a lot of us talk about that with our students now as we prepare them not only for graduate school entry, but also going into the workplace. Anybody want to respond to that? Dr. Tunstad?
Yeah, I once had a research student who started in my Bridges Community College program, and then she transferred and worked in my lab for a while, but her real interest was in biochemistry. So she wanted to move to, and did move to Dr. Moman's lab. And she finished her master's there and applied to graduate school and got an interview. And she was really scared. She came to talk to me before the interview because we had a publication and she was on the publication. And, you know, we had to walk through how she should talk about that paper because she felt like she didn't contribute much, right? But she had contributed a significant portion. She just wasn't owning her part of the work. And so we had to walk through that when your name is on a publication, that you need to be familiar with all parts of that, even though you may have worked on one part of it. And you need to feel confident that you were part of a team that that accomplished that work and published that. So I think that imposter syndrome, I'm pretty sure I had it when I was an undergraduate and as a graduate student. But I think that, again, having good people that you can talk to and who know more than you. I was fortunate to have someone like that in my laboratory at UCLA as a graduate student. And I think that peer mentoring is really important for that imposter syndrome, because you can see your peer a few steps ahead of you in the process, and you can see how they're negotiating things. And that helps to calm down that imposter syndrome. And so we use that quite a bit in the MORE programs and in our research laboratories, so that we have the more advanced students mentoring certain aspects for the younger students to build agency, to build ownership of what they're doing. And those types of experiences really help with that imposter syndrome when you watch someone, when you actually do the work, and when you are recognized for the work that you're doing and the development that you have. So I think that all of those are important in imposter syndrome. I don't know anyone, including most men I know, that don't have that at some point.
Okay. Dr. Torres, your mic is open.
Oh.
Do you want to jump into that? I know it's sort of like, that's my
I'm
way
sorry,
of knowing how to.
I didn't realize it was
First, like,
open. Well, I would just say that one thing that really helps is, having successes along the way, even if they're really small, really kind of boosts your confidence. And also to surround yourself with people who appreciate you and see the value of your work. So, I continue to collaborate on projects with people that I either met in graduate school or in my postdoc, and we appreciate each other and it feels good to work with them.
Yeah, so for my audience, I really want you to make sure that you're looking in the chat. There's really I know I've probably got a lot of ADD because I'm multitasking, but I think our panelists are answering some of the great advice in the chat, like not getting in your own way, not being your own worst critic, being able to give yourself some grace. So if you, and Nene, if we can capture the chat, if that's okay, because I know that this is being recorded, I think our panelists are responding to some of the questions that you're asking about their level of discrimination and how they overcame it and the approaches that they have. So I don't want you to miss that there is really great advice in the chat. I'm actually going to turn to Dr. Foster for a second because I know that she's been working on mentoring, and some of your questions in the chat are about how do you form those relationships? How do you work with a network? But it's also about identifying a mentor, as Dr. Tunstad has said, Dr. Lewis said, identifying people who can affirm you. But I'd like Dr. Foster to kind of talk about mentoring a little bit, either from the perspective of looking for a mentor or being a mentor.
I will speak on looking for a mentor first, where students need to understand that it's not about just sitting there and absorbing everything. We are here to educate you, right? So if a student needs something, finding ways, maybe writing down what you're going to say in office hours, but finding ways to make that first connection. All they have to do is get started. They see something interesting, a professor says something in class, they see someone walking down the hall, and it's really just making that first move that I think is the hardest on the students' part. So and also feeling like they deserve it. I don't know how many times I get, I'm so sorry for bothering you. I'm like, this is my job. You're not bothering me. Come over here, right? And so having the student have that self-advocacy to say, you know what, I'm going to talk to that person, and write it down and practice and rehearse with your friends if you have to, but just talk to them. From the mentors, we need to understand that our students are not necessarily ourselves, and that we have changed. Even if our students are just the way we used to be, we have changed through the institution. It's been a while since we've been students. So finding ways to connect with students and be aware of their needs for communication, their needs for transparency, and thinking about developing the whole person and not just screaming a series of instructions about them, in my case, the molecular sciences, right? But training that person to develop their intellectual selves. We're their intellectual mothers is what we are, right? And trying to find every way to develop that is our job. And it takes training, right? We don't know how to do this. We have our own experiences, but being able to share stories together, being able to look at the literature on mentoring can help us and our institution move a lot further as far as completely developing our students and not just making human calculators or whatever the outcome might be for knowledge content and skills in a field.
Mm. I love this part of our conversation where each of you, because there are multiple representatives within each of the departments, and I love how you mentioned, Dr. Liu, that you were one of two women and you wanted to build a network, and I think that Dr. Wen talked about Dr. Foster, Dr. Tunstad being in her department. I would like for you to talk about, and this is really for our faculty colleagues who are part of this, who are part of our audience. What can we do to better develop healthy networks for with our colleagues? I do know that the departments take great pride in making sure that junior faculty aren't isolated, and that we try to do some things to promote professionalism. But when it comes down to the nitty gritty, it's about having a professional network that can move you forward. Could you talk? Would you talk about that and how we might be able to do some things differently in how we facilitate healthy networks? I know. Did I stump my audience? I know Pamela, you talked about that. You showed your mentors. Sylvia, you talked about that. Daphne, all of you talked about that. Are there things that we could do structurally to facilitate that, or is it an organic process?
No, you're doing it now. This is part of what we need. We need opportunities to see each other. I've actually seen more of you, my colleagues, in this last year than I have in 5 years previously, because sometimes we feel isolated, and I got an hour and a half commute and I drive in and do my stuff and I leave. And this has been lovely. I want to see people and I want to feel connected to you. And I am so proud to be part of this group. So it's events like this that we can all attend that are part of forming those bonds and establishing and maintaining those very important relationships and connections.
Other thoughts, colleagues? Yeah, Sylvia.
Well, I would say the social aspect is very important for new faculty members. And some of it, I still remember Daphne coming into my office and saying, you want to have tea? And then we worked on sharing an office, because in our department, people used to share office when there were more of us. And that was really helpful because we helped each other. Each of us had certain strengths that the other one could from and benefit from. And it's been very successful. And, with other new faculty members, I found that going to Chancellor's office QR meetings where we spend 1 hour car and you can talk about the department and the culture and, how does it work when you put your RTP file up and, and how about doing this and that. Sometimes the questions are just these things that you don't even think about anymore. And I think it's very useful that, each department puts, assigns a mentor, but, some people are better at it and others are not as good. I mean, my said, the one time I asked something, he said, go see Dad's RTP file. It's a good file. That was about the mentoring I got from my mentor. And I didn't really ask for any because I'm somebody who goes and asks anybody, not just my mentor. If you have somebody who's not as outgoing, then you nudging and saying, hey, let's go for lunch. And I think it's difficult when we are all busy with our various things to come up and have these opportunities. And so just keep reminding ourselves that that's an important part.
Yeah. Daphne, were you gonna add some comments
Yes,
to that?
Yeah, just Silvia, when she's talking, something just popped to my mind. I think mentoring is very good among faculty members, especially for new faculty. It's good that a new faculty member get a mentor from the department. So maybe we can have another mentor from another department. So maybe some, like me, I can volunteer, right, to be a mentor for a new faculty member from another department. So we have volunteers, and then we can pair up a new faculty member with a faculty member from another department.
That's a great idea. We'll steal it. And part of that is, you know, what I miss about being on campus is being able to connect people and do introductions online, you know, because reading people's CVs and knowing that they have intellectual interests one with the other, or that there's some connectedness. So I'm going to put in a healthy plug for the college's retreat. That's also a way to get to know people when people are doing their Ignite talks. This year, we'll actually be talking about inclusiveness and diversity and hard conversations. But our colleagues who are planning the retreat have scheduled opportunities for people to do Ignite talks as well. Other thoughts from any of the panelists? We're winding down our time. I'm so happy that many of you joined us, students, colleagues, Emeriti colleagues, friends, and friends of friends, because I know, Daphne, you have some friends of friends who were going to join us today, and we certainly appreciate that. A couple of last words. I'm going to go by who's on my screen. Dr. Liu, you're up on my screen, followed by Dr. Foster, Heubach, Regan, Torres, and Tunstad. And we'll have to give Dr. Wen her own like opportunity to share, because she really does have such an interesting life, and I really, you know, want you all to share, and we will have a part 2 of this. Dr. Liu, some final thoughts?
Oh, first I want to thank Dean to create this opportunity to share our stories and with the audience. And also, I think Dean also did so many things trying to foster this this environment, like the retreat, whatever. So I think we're taking the first step, and I'm very happy to be included today. I'm honored. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Foster?
I would just like to say, be yourself. Don't be afraid of yourself. Don't hide any part of yourself. Follow your dreams, including the academic, which we focus on this campus. Bring it all.
Thank you. Dr. Heubach?
Women rock. What can I say?
Dr. Regan?
I want to second what Krishna said. Everyone is welcome, right? Too long we've been told there's no seat at the table for us. There's a seat for everyone. So pull up a chair.
Dr. Torres?
Well, I would just say seek out all sorts of different opportunities within your field, even if you don't have a lot of experience yet. Apply for things. Don't be afraid to leave LA or apply for things that take you to other cities or countries. Applying does not hurt you. Then when you get accepted, you can make that decision, and hopefully it'll be a leap to do new things.
Dr. Tunstad?
Yeah, I'm all about people's untapped potential, recognizing the potential that you have, the abilities that you have, and maximizing those opportunities. As Dr. Torres said, you know, you don't have to accept an opportunity, but you're not going to get that opportunity to decide unless you apply in the first place. There are lots of opportunities and lots of directions, and there are a lot of resources amongst the faculty to help you decide which directions you might want to go in if you're undecided. But you have potential, you have talent, and your job is to recognize that and develop it to its maximum for your goals.
Thank you. My final words to you as an audience are thank you for being here. When you walk into a room and when you walk across the world, there are always perspectives that we carry, that we know are right, that are based on our experiences. Open up your mind to say, is what I think really what's going on here? Is what I know what I really know? Is this person a person with whom I can learn something new from? gain a new friend, expand my network, learn something that I didn't know, cross the aisles. Our colleagues have shared with us, and I want to just point out that each one of these women has worked hard. They make it sound easy. They share their love, but more than anything, each of these women has worked hard. They have challenged themselves to be visible in a world that would otherwise invisibilize them. They have been deliberate in what they do. They have networked, and they continue to be committed to not only to themselves, and each of them has families and other networks beyond this kind of academic professional way in which they've shared themselves. And I'm asking each of us to get to learn one new thing about each other. I'm appreciative to each of you colleagues for accepting our invitation, for being here. Thank you for sharing your stories. And we will continue to learn more about each other. I would be remiss without thanking Nene Obeche, who is our communication specialist, who sent out the invitations to you, who worked with me on getting these things, a part of it. I always thank the staff in the dean's office. You all know, if you want to catch me, catch Yolanda. I love what you said, Krishna. When people come into your office, they say, "I'm sorry, am I bothering you?" Well, I'm your dean. If you're a staff member, if you're a faculty member, if you're a student, if you're a member of the university, I work for you, and it's been my honor and my pleasure. So please don't be a stranger. I have every other week a lunch with the dean. Come and hang out with me. I love talking about, everything from Star Trek. If you start talking about Star Trek, it'll be hard for me to stop. I love hearing about Pamela's dogs, but don't be strangers one from another. I just want to thank you, colleagues, for sharing yourself, for being part of this community. I want to thank the audience for chiming in today. I miss you. I appreciate you. I also want to acknowledge the two associate deans that have joined us on this as well, and many of our other colleagues. Have a great day. We'll see you at the next round of our communications. Have a pleasant evening. And thank you so much, colleagues, for all that you do to make Cal State LA a great place to be. Good night.